This is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch and Tim Dahl. Welcome to episode number 72. I would say it's our Thanksgiving special. Well, there's a few things maybe we're thankful for this week or month or soon, Tim.
I'm thankful for the grand finale fireworks ending of our intro about a stack of animal stories. But let's go to stuff on the forefront right now. Former Mayor Dinkins passed away last night. He was in his 90s. And it's kind of interesting because, of course, his notorious position and just how things played out with those classic Crown Heights riots.
What year were those?
I remember reading about them. I think they were 92, 91. I remember as a teenager reading about them. And of course, they were tragic. It was just urban racial tension has a different face right now. But back then, it was like do the right thing. It was the Hasidic community and the Caribbean community, and a bunch of people died. It was ugly. But this is why I'm saying this. Dinkins' biggest political enemy was Giuliani, who, of course, is in the news like crazy. And, I'm going to pass the mic to you, Lydia, but Giuliani was brutal with that sensitive riot, racial tension, neighborhood thing.
Could it be because he's fucking racist? I have to say, the highlight of Giuliani's non-career must have been, I have to say, it wasn't hair dye. I think his head was leaking shit because he's so full of it.
Well, for the listeners I'm going to try to do a really quick reduction of the Crown Heights riots. So basically, there was a parade. There was already tension brewing because the Hasidic community is very isolated, and it was their version of gentrification. As those families were growing, they were buying more places, and of course, the Caribbeans thought they were being pushed out. Blah blah blah. Anyhow, there was a parade for this guy's birthday or something, and they had their whole private police, and they're on Utica Avenue, and it's still debate. I was reading today about the whole history, and of course, how it played out in court. Did he accelerate in a yellow light, or did he run a red light? Anyway, he ended up plowing off the road to avoid No, it was people that worshiped the rabbi that wanted to be in the caravan little parade, and the rabbi got ahead, and the guy felt like I can't see him anymore, and started accelerating, just gunning it through, and then he ran this light, ended up hitting some like wall that brought down a scaffolding, and basically a bunch of like 2 7 and a 6-year-old like Ghanaian immigrant kids got totally crushed. This is where it got tense. So in the Hasidic community, they have like their own ambulances, and they have all this stuff, and so it showed up to help him and basically brought him to the hospital while these kids were still pinned. And of course, that just put alcohol on the fire, or gasoline on the fire of the tensions that were already existing.
Well, I'll speak about tensions now. I mean, I don't understand. First of all, I don't understand the institution of marriage. But what's happening now in the Hasidic community is weddings with 7,000 maskless people wearing fur hats, but no masks. And they're going after, I mean, this is worse than any college campus. It's worse than just about anything that's going on. That's one of the worst things going down in New York right now. Well, as well as I just saw that they busted a swingers party. That was only 80 people, and they weren't Hasids, by the way.
In New York, for the people that don't know, Trump got about 17% of the vote. Really didn't get much at all. And it's been huge in basically like blue collar white neighborhoods and in the Hasidic neighborhood, which is also parallel to the spread of COVID, which of course, if you're denying it. So there, and in Staten Island, it's exploding right now, which is tragic. I don't understand, because people are dying, and it still doesn't seem to budge the perspective on that. Going back just to the tragedy of the Crown Heights riots, because it lasted for days. Dinkins got blamed, and then Sharpton came in. There was looting. There was retaliation killings. It was just really bad. But then Giuliani, because he hated Dinkins because he was bitter towards him, and he basically had nothing to do with Crown Heights, led this march of off-duty cops, wasted on beer, like shitloads of thousands, going over the Brooklyn Bridge to City Hall, and they had guns on them, and they were like, this city's got a, N-word mayor and, blah, blah, blah. I don't even want to say. And Giuliani was the fucking leader of that. He was on the loud horn and it's like, wait, this has nothing to do. It was a divide and conquer. He turned into a race issue that had nothing even to do with him.
All right, look, Giuliani's shit for brains. It's been justified. That comment's been justified by the fact he was actually leaking brown from his fucking head, okay? I'm into Lonnie Yeary, who started the Facebook group Suburban Housewives Against Trump. She told Salon magazine that Trump's suburban housewife tweet was what pushed her over the edge. It really angered me, she said, because I am a suburban housewife. And I know a couple of other women. Well, now I think it's up to 200,000 women against Trump. Call him what you will. But why don't you like me? You know why they don't like you, Donald? Dumbo. Donnie, criminal, con, huckster. You're a misogynist, you're racist, you have a Stepford daughter who's also going to prison. We can't wait, she's going to look lovely in orange. And basically, you're a fucking idiot. And I think women are a little bit smarter than that at this point. I don't know. I'm just saying.
As things are collapsing on Trump, and of course, we have 60 days, so we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. Totally, we know some stuff. One of the revenge maneuvers that went down with his supporters was putting up $2 million bail to get Kyle Rittenhouse out, the vigilante Illinois kid that went to, was it Kenosha, Wisconsin, to defend a car dealership that he doesn't own. Like, okay, man. But the people that were very big and vocal and actually just organized and got the money for this bail were the actors Ricky Schroeder and Scott Baio, 80s Reagan era kid TV stars. Ricky Schroeder was in Silver Spoons and was some cop propaganda show. Like, was it NYPD? Is that what he was in? Well, he's a total piece of shit. I mean, I never liked him to begin with, but like, well, he was in the Champ. Scott Baio. I mean, Joni Loves Chachi. Come on. The only thing good about Joni Loves Chachi is that Vinnie Vincent, who ended up playing for Kiss, did all the film score or soundtrack to that, which is a fun fact for music nerds. But Ricky Schroeder. I mean, what the fuck? And so wait a second. The Trump supporters were like, oh, there's no evidence, the Russian collusion thing. You have to follow the law. The law is a lie. They couldn't prove it. And so now, of course, then there's no evidence for the actual election. And then basically there's no evidence that that fucking Kyle Rittenhouse was even defending him fucking self. I mean, basically, I'm judge, jury, executioner as a civilian. Okay. Anyhow.
I have to talk about this article I just read, where a doctor who has long advocated that a different approach to treating violence, because he thinks that violence is actually a contagion and there is a super spreader in the White House right now that is causing people to be empowered to commit acts of violence. And so this organization called Cure Violence goes into different communities and teaches people how to de-escalate as opposed to the escalation of insanity we've had in the last 4 years. And then where they started was the West Garfield Park in Chicago, which was the worst police district in the country at the time. 67% drop in shootings and killings through non-policing intervention. So this is what the whole country is going to need right now is cure stupidity. We could start there.
I'm gonna continue with stupidity. Right now, one of the big conspiracy trajectories, or I don't know how you describe it, movements. There's a huge conspiracy out there. It's really kind of taken off that Wyoming, the state, does not exist. So it's real.
Cheney is. Dick Cheney?
Dick Cheney comes.
Maybe he doesn't exist either anymore.
Well, that's what's funny because, they're not taking the postmodern, constructs and what really exists out there, which, that is a thing. They're like, have you ever met someone from Wyoming? See, it doesn't exist. I mean, it's really fucking dumb. No, check it out. That's a thing. Let's continue with Hicks. It's on these like chat boards of or I don't even, that shows my age, chat boards, I don't know, it's on these like Trump MAGA things,
They saying that New York is a state of mind. I guess Wyoming is a non-state of mind, of no mind.
I'm gonna stay with the hick thing. So Justin Lee Smith, age 17, from North Carolina, absolute COVID denier. He's like, I don't care. I'm gonna go everywhere. Drove to, I think Mississippi, go on a hunting trip. And that's the thing about these hunters that hunt for deer. I think it's about just beer drinking, because they have these like little platform things that they make in the trees and just hang out all day and wait for something to go by, so they can sit down and shoot a deer. Well, his platform that he and his buddy made didn't work so well, and it started getting a little wobbly, and he fell 10 feet. But it wasn't necessarily that he fell 10 feet. The barrel of his rifle completely impaled his chest and went through his complete body. And that's all. So that's all I can find out, because what I want to know is, did the gun go off when that happened? Because that would have been something to see. Like, bam! And it's, but anyhow, he's done.
Well, if he went to the hospital, he'll be paying for that for the rest of his life. Okay, well, he's lucky because he wouldn't have been able to afford to live. According to the latest survey and study, hospitals now charge up to 1,800% more for services than they cost. Excuse me. So, in other words, I mean, it can be the 100 most expensive hospitals, and is there a not expensive hospital in America? Charge between $1,120 and $1,808 for every $100 of their cost.
When I had my appendectomy in 2012, fortunately I had insurance. God, I was just curious. I was like, what's this hospital going to charge? I had to go to an emergency room and have my appendix taken out. And when I was looking at it, it was a state deal, because I was on Medicaid or something, because whatever, I'm not going to talk about my money, but, obviously the state has better deals. But what I read was that appendectomies, which is a fairly common and very easy procedure, the hospitals charge a range between $15,000 and $120,000, like totally not regulated. It's just, well, it's absurd. And of course, it's not actually benefiting anyone except for some.
Well, and as it is now, hospital profits, well, people can't afford, of course, to pay $140 for a fucking Band-Aid on their finger, much less if they have a serious problem, much less if they have COVID, because we can't afford $100,000, $150,000 for the drugs that Dumbo got. Their profits are now at about $88 billion. Well, we don't want socialized medicine because corporate cocksuckers are on the fucking payroll.
Because people are stupid, and I'm going to give you another stupid person story. So, In-N-Out Burger, which the West Coast really love that thing.
I love it.
I mean, I think it's overrated. I'll eat it. I'm not saying I won't eat it, but I think it's over. So,
all the bun.
So Colorado just opened 2 In-N-Out Burgers, one in Denver and one in Aurora. And I guess people went nuts because 3 pantless men got into a brawl because they were in the 14-hour line to order their meal. And, sorry, if you want to save time, you can go in the 8-hour line that was a drive-through. And they just started, the tensions got high. They got really high. And they just started wailing on each other. One guy was like one of these like sweatpants fat guy things. And so he was not very fancy in his steps with fighting. So his like pants fell down. And then but the people that were fighting, like, I think they jumped out of their car, but they were like, I haven't left my house in 6 months wearing boxers and, pajamas and stuff. But yeah, those are people's priorities right now.
I like this study that I just read about not just minor liars, but pathological. I mean, we've all been in too intimate a relationship for the last 4 fucking years with a pathological liar. And actually what happens when you're a narcissistic sociopath, it's called pseudologia fantastica, pathological liars, that when they do it a lot, and they do it for a variety of reasons, to gain control, or they lie to exonerate themselves to justify their behavior, and the more they do it, the better they get at it, and the bigger their lies can become. And now a study published in Nature Neuroscience found that signal reduction in the front of the brain associated with emotion, which is sensitive to the history of dishonest behavior, it becomes just desensitized to dishonesty, so it can't even tell anymore, and it actually escalates, and the magnitude of self-serving dishonesty just keeps going. In other words, that's what we've witnessed. And do we really need Neuroscience magazine to tell us that? It is one of my favorite, though.
It's all real studies show that these are just parts of our human nature, and so we as a social species, just like dogs or dolphins, we've managed with our awesome brains to dominate what we've dominated.
When you're a pathological truth teller, then what happens? Other parts of your body get stimulated. Hey, I'm having a little overstimulation here. I don't think it's my prefrontal cortex.
The primal motivations are hoarding resources. Our sex acts are basically simulated like, I'm spreading my genes. These are the primal things that drive us. So absolutely, once you're elevated above the pack in perception, then the behavior starts acting in really outrageous ways that, well, the history of the dictator collapsing can fall on itself. May I go into my animal grand finale? Because I got a bunch of animal stories, and am I even an animal guy? But that's dog-sized lizards are taking over the South. It started with the exotic animal trade businesses in Florida, Joe Exotic and all that stuff. Of course, they get it out. People let them go. So this, what is it called? This lizard, the white the Argentine black and white tagu, and it's native to South America. These things get 4 feet. They're like a dog. They get 4 feet, and they eat.
I'm looking for a new pet.
They eat anything. That's the thing. They're omnivores, and of course, the reason why it's bringing a lot of attention is it's invading all these conservation sanctuaries, and so it's like wolfing down sea turtles. It's just going nuts, and it's not native to this continent, so it's exploding. And that's part of. Speaking of exotic animal trade, rumors say Trump's gonna pardon Joe Exotic from Tiger King. Is that what?
Tiger King.
Tiger King.
I just gotta jump in here because the Stepford daughter is so freaking dumb. She just tweeted that, greenhouse gases have gone down 9.2%. Let's thank daddy because people are fucking locked in their houses because of COVID, you dumb cunt.
So animal attacks on humans have, just like murder, animal attacks on humans have gone up this year too. And a lot of it has to do with conservation. So actually, like a lot of these things that we're saving are starting to attack us, and our population's growing. So we're butting heads a little bit. Of course, humans win on that one. 100 shark attacks on humans a year, 100 million sharks dead a year. But that's a different. The 8th fatal shark attack in Australia happened. A 55-year-old bodyboarder was it was like a half-hour mauling. He was out there like 100 feet out. It was really deep. It wasn't really deep. It was pretty shallow. It was a tiger shark, and it was just like, it was savoring its food. It was just taking little nibbles, and everyone's like, "Oh my God!" All this commotion, and a bunch of fat cops came running out, and they're like shooting guns at it. It was just real chaos. The guy died, and then of course the shark was swimming around afterwards, and then the cops went up and just like blew it away with like handguns. But a better animal attack on human story was Tunde Masika from Zimbabwe, a 85-year-old man. A pack of hyenas stormed his hut, literally dragged him 1,000 feet away from the hut, and just went nuts on the guy. They only found his torso. Everything basically from the pelvis down, completely gone.
Were there any witnesses to this crime?
Oh, they know it was hyenas. There was like hyena feces.
Have you ever smelt a hyena? They're rather gamey.
So this is what I didn't get about. I didn't know this about hyenas. I always just assumed that they were canines. They're not. I forget the term. They're like basically this hybrid of dogs and cats. They're weird, and they're always laughing like.
Hey, are you trying to impersonate me or a hyena?
Well, all right. Well, all right. Here's
Wrapping it up.
I'm wrapping up with another. So, if anyone saw it, Fort Myers, Florida. This I can find his name. Richard Willards, 74, was walking his new puppy. He's walking his.
I love this one.
He's walking his new puppy, which was some kind of spaniel. It's called like a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel. Gunner was its name. I think it was 3 months old. A probably a 3-month-old alligator just like
the gator was pretty small too.
Darted out, latched onto Gunner, and pulled it into this little wet swamp thing. Of course, the retiree who was chomping on a cigar
did not let go of the cigar. This was the best part.
It was clenched on. He got waist deep. I mean, I kind of, hey man, a little bit of a bro fist pump on that one. I mean, because the thing is, alligators, they don't have razor sharp teeth. And they actually, gators and crocodiles don't eat things alive. They clamp on because they won't let go. You can't pry it open, and they drown you, and then they swallow you like a reptile likes to do.
I hear that there is approximately 1 million in Florida.
Oh, yeah. Florida is insane with alligators. Of course, they're the only crocodile in the North America as well.
And 11-footers.
Oh, they get bigger than that. They get bigger than that. So, but the guy got waist deep. He managed to pry the fucking. He saved
Gunner.
And this is where I'm wrapping up because Fort Myers, Florida. I lived right after college before I moved to New York to save money. I had a music gig down in Sanibel Island, right off of Fort Myers. It was like these exclusive islands off of Fort Myers. Just as I was about to move, to give you a backdrop. Bob Rauschenberg, Madonna's Captiva is the island next to us. Just these kind of rich people live there. Ted Koppel, whatever. Some gazillionaire was walking, 94-year-old guy, just enjoying his wealth to the bitter end, was walking his dog when I was there, and same situation. It was a bigger dog, but it was a bigger gator also. And this thing, it wasn't Gunner, but it dart like a laser beam, latched onto it. It was like a corgi or something. And the guy had a cane. He started beating the alligator. The alligator got more interested in the guy and ripped his arm off. I was thinking to myself, I was like, what a cool way to go when you're 94. I mean, you made it that long, and then you die in the most primal, hyperdynamic way, like an alligator ripped your fucking arm off.
Somebody that's still alive and pushing 90s, not quite 94, and I doubt he's going to encounter an alligator anytime soon, is our next guest, David Amram, who's been doing music as long as I've been alive, and I've been doing music as long as you've been alive. So this is kind of an interesting Thanksgiving Day non-special. We have plenty of things to be thankful for. One is orange jumpsuits for the entire Trump family, coming, I hope, very soon. This is the Lydia and Spin with Lydia Lunch. Tim Dahl, Simon Slater, the producer, is with us, and I am very excited to have David Amram, who has done more and lived longer than most of us ever will, and worked with so many incredible people. And I am so thrilled to be talking to him right now in his 89th year. Welcome, David, and thank you so much for your time.
Liddy, it's great to talk to you and to your listeners, and I'm glad to be on your program, having admired what you've done for many a moon.
You have worked with so many incredible people. My head gets dizzy even just thinking about Dizzy Gillespie, Thelonious Monk, Kazan, Frank, and I don't even have enough breath in my throat to list your accomplishments. And here you go. And now your fourth book is also coming out, the next 80 years. Is this correct?
Well, finally, it was supposed to have come out, Lydia, on my 80th birthday, which was 9 years ago.
Oh, frustration.
And they made a film called David Amram, The First 80 Years, and we thought the book would come out at the same time. But I was so busy that I did get started on it, but I didn't quite get it done in time. So that was called Upbeat 9 Lives of a Musical Cat. And I was going to start my fourth book called David Amram, The Next 80 Years. And I thought, well, Since I might not live to be 160, it might sound a little
Oh,
self-centered.
the rate you're going at, I'm not so sure. Now look, I don't I don't feel like my age, 61. I don't look it. What does even 89 feel like? I mean, these are just numbers designed to, help us to understand what. I mean, do you feel any different now than you did when you were 69, 49?
I didn't really notice it until August 8th. I had an incredible concert in Saratoga Springs, New York, and they played my Greenwich Village portraits, and I orchestrated it from the original alto saxophone and piano with everything, every note written out, the string orchestra. I was so knocked out. I said, wow. I drove all the way back right after the concert, all the way to Beacon, New York. I called up my manager, Judge Yeager, the next day and was raving to him about all the great stuff we had coming up for my 90th birthday year. And he finally said, turn on the news. I said, this is all. I said, what do you mean, Doug? He said, this is serious. He said, I think the world's going to change. Forget about all the things that those 15 things we had planned around the U.S. and Europe for the 90th. They're not going to happen. Everything's going to get postponed. I said, wow, really? So then, for the first time I can remember in my life, I actually had some time off. And I had to start thinking about what I was trying to do and what I hope to do and what I hope I could encourage other people to do for themselves. And as I began thinking and looking around and looking at all the stuff on my walls that I have, of all the places I've been, I said, wow. And then I suddenly realized that when you're not that frantic, you don't have quite as much energy. You more or
It's
less have
interesting.
to see how you are. And I said, whoa, I think I'm getting older, but I better not tell you.
It's amazing because, Lydia's done it longer, but I'm 45, but I've been touring my whole adult life.
So I've been touring almost as long as Tim Dahl has been alive, and only about half as old as you are.
Even being the youngest guy in the room here, I can relate, especially if you're doing tons of tours, the adrenaline, the excitement, the thrill of just your own motivation, the events that fall around that. You can't believe you get through it, but you get through it. And then exactly, as soon as you sit down, it's like stopping in a marathon halfway through. You don't want to keep it going if you stop halfway through.
Exactly. And so I realized I was always like the young phenom. I remember when I worked for Patty Chesky in 1963 on Broadway. He did a Passion of Joseph D. And he said, we have a young group of people here like yourself. I said, well, wow, that's great. And he said, you're all on the lip of success. And I, of course, interpreted that as meaning we can still get you cheap. But I figured that was okay. It was so much fun doing that, But then I thought about that, and I said, man, after all the years of being the young cat, because I started when I was a kid, now I have to become a professional older person. The key is you're only as old as you make other people feel.
Oh,
perfect. Exactly. And you know what? Excuse me, but okay, I might be a youngster according to you. I'm surprised. We are all surprised we live this long. But I feel that, the older I get, and I've got a ways to catch up to you, but I will, because I always thought of myself as being the oldest living woman of rage. We have to represent. We have to represent that, age is what you make of it. And some of us, like this, like who we're talking with right now, both Tim, I and David, it's like we're not going to stop. I mean, I don't want to die on stage. I would say I'd rather kill somebody on stage, but I have one bullet aimed at one man. We don't need to go there. I'm just saying you like that, but we're not going to stop because it's what we do. But then again, I liked the quarantine. I can be incredibly lazy. People think, oh, how could you be lazy? 14-page PDF. Give me a break. Because I like to relax. I like to enjoy. I love pleasure. And then I create at my own pace.
I'd like to run with that because I'm going to run with what you say, David. You're only as old as how you make people feel. But looking at your career, In a weird way, I would say you're so ahead of your time in the fact that your work is so eclectic and varied. And with the new generation, right before the internet age, having great access to distribution of information, and then now the internet, it's endless. The whole new generation are maximalists in terms of everything that they got their hands in. And so when I look at all the things you did, it's so wide and varied. How did you even have access to all that stuff? Just being in New York?
No, I was brought up on a farm during the Depression in Feasterville, Pennsylvania, population 200, my options being zero.
Okay.
So in that sense, having zero options, you have no place to go but up. I used to hear the train going from Philadelphia to New York called the Crusader. It was a great silver, like the wonderful movie Silver Streak. It looked like that. And you could hear it rushing by. It didn't stop at Sullivan Springs, which is a few miles from Feasterville. But I used to hear that train, and I thought, boy, maybe someday I could get on a train like that and New York, go to New York City and feel those wonderful things that I've seen in the grade B movies with people wearing tails and drinking cocktails and being sophisticated, and all the music and art that I vaguely could hear on the radio. Because AM radio in those days had jazz and symphony music and folk music and pop music and all kinds of wonderful stuff. And I always kind of dreamed about that. So when I finally got to New York at the age of 24, after being in the Army for 2 years and getting discharged in Europe and traveling around the world before I even got in the Army, and playing all over the country and meeting Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie and all these fantastic people, Dimitri Petropoulos, the conductor of the Philharmonic, who shaped my life when I was a kid. And I got to the big town and I said, man, here I am. And I was just like some kind of a crazed hick and stumbled and fumbled and met Charles Mingus, and he invited me to come and play with him, with his group. So the third week in New York there, I was playing with these amazing people, going to Manhattan School of Music in the GI Bill studying composition.
Which instrument were you playing with Mingus? Because you're a multi-instrumentalist.
French horn.
Which is like one of the hardest instruments, whenever you're in a rehearsal with a conductor and he goes, he wants to hear an isolated group. It's either the double bass or French horn. And they're all great musicians, but they're thinking, does everyone think we stink? Because it's just so hard to play those instruments.
And where the hell did you get a French horn on a farm in Pennsylvania?
Well, I stumbled into that when I was in high school. I was romantically attracted to a wonderful young woman who played the French horn. And I had braces on my teeth, so I couldn't play the trumpet anymore. And I thought, well, if I took up the horn, it wouldn't hurt as much playing. I could sit next to her. And then, of course, when I began to do that, I heard everything in the symphony differently. And since I love jazz and symphony music, I thought, well, maybe I play jazz on the horn. I tried to do that. And when I met Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker and a lot of other musicians, they said, man, there's only one other cat doing that, Julius Watkins. You have to meet him someday. Everything else in my life, I just stumbled and fumbled my way in with the 11th.
Well, that's what we need to know. Like, you stumbled into Charles Mingus, you stumbled into Dizzy Gillespie. How do you stumbling into these cats?
Well, the way everybody else does, because they were all very open, and I guess they must have seen something. There was something inquisitive, desirable, that really wanted
passion.
Really, really wanted to do something and learn something and be able to be part of something. And also, I learned how to say please and thank you. And they saw that
very important.
I was actually interested in something besides myself. And as I hit 90, I'm still that way. I'm still stumbling and fumbling and bumping into amazing people that I learn a lot from. I met Joe Papp, 1956, in a church on the Lower East Side. A friend of mine who was having a drug problem was thrown out of his place, and his girlfriend was an excellent pianist, but she couldn't read or write music. She played for Mary Anthony. They said, they'd like me to write music for this crazy guy, Joe Papp, who wants to have free Shakespeare. You went to music school. Why don't you do it? So I went there. Joe said later on I figured I looked so far out that I must be talented.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Well, the people you've listed, of course, are all American icons here, but they're also, a lot of them were notoriously not the easiest people to have in your immediate life.
And also a lot of drug abuse. And you mentioned that, drug abuse. I mean, how did you escape from that, or did you? Did you dabble?
Well, I had just enough experience to realize that when I dabbled in the worst of them all, perhaps I do my family and everyone else a favor and just jump off the sixth floor walk-up hallways and not bother anybody. My 12-step program was seeing a lot of people I loved and admired dying. And after about the 200th friend of mine died, I said, maybe that stuff's not good for you. So now when I go to schools and they say, oh man, here's a hip cat, he knew Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Jack Kerouac, they go down the line and they bring out the tray of designer drugs.
Yeah.
I said,
All right, I'm just going to ask. They break out the tray of designer drugs, but what was your favorite drug?
well, my drug was music and meeting people where I could feel some kind of a smile or life force or something, some kind of a light in that dark tunnel that we all.
So when you were attracted to, say, Dizzy Gillespie, Thelonious Monk, Charlie Parker, Mingus, all these legends, jazz legends, was your relationship and your studying with Gunther Schuller before that or after? And I'm trying to see where the thread is in the chronological thing.
I was playing in a bar in Kleine Bockenheimer Strasse called the Jazz Keller in 1954. I was
played there too. All right, that's a different story.
And I was there when I was in the Army, 50 stationed around there, 53, 54. I used to go there. And when I got discharged from the Army, I got a place in Frankfurt so I could continue to play there every night. And Gunther came in. I was still in the Army. And he wrote in his book just before he died, I was walking down the street in Frankfurt and I heard a jazz French horn. And since Gunther played on those wonderful records but never actually improvised, he was fascinated. He came in and he talked to me and said, please, man, he said, that's great. What do you want to do? I said, I just want to blow my horn and write symphony music. He said, really? Have you studied? I said, well, yeah, I went into my minimal. He said, you should come to New York City, come back to the States. You could study French horn with me because he was then playing the French horn.
Yep.
He said, I think you could do some wonderful stuff. So I went and I studied horn with him. And then when I was playing with Mingus, he used to come down to the Cafe Bohemia and hear us. It was just a bumble thing where he walked in the door, heard me playing jazz, liked me. I stayed friends with Gunther through all those years. And of course, he became a terrific composer and an amazing.
His third stream theory and all that stuff that kind of came about in the 50s, kind of after bebop. And because I'm also thinking about looking at your composition history and your involvement with jazz people. And would you consider yourself a third streamer? No, not at all. Okay.
But I loved him and respected him. And he came from a point of view as a composer where he admired Arnold Schoenberg,
right,
and Weber, and that he wanted to incorporate 12-tone music in everything. I always felt in the land of beauty, if you take a bridge across the river, you're not crossing over. You're just going to a different part of the land of beauty. So there's nothing to cross over to. As far as fusion goes, playing chopsticks is fusion because you've got two different things moving in different directions. And harmony, melody, counterpoint, beginning, middle, and an end have always been the part of everything, every music that you hear in the world. So I believe more in what Lester Young taught us all, which was tell your story, and not to copy what other people did, but to learn from what other people did, learn as much as you can, and then tell your story. And I realized, of course, that that's the hardest thing to do, because our society trains us to be the top dog, super swine, dump and crap on everybody. Therefore, you can prove that you're a better imitation of whoever the super swine was before you. That's fine too, and I'm not against capitalism or upward mobility or anything, but there is a thing called beauty and truth and following what your heart tells, and there are standards, and there are things that don't need a definition or a branding to mean something, and that everybody is creative, everybody's got a story to tell, everybody has something artistic to contribute until they're talked out of it.
Tim Dahl was touching on something earlier, that you've worked with what people consider difficult people. Who was the most difficult, or were they difficult?
No, you get to understand lots of times it's because they feel bad about themselves, and they want to be loved, and they want to be respected, and they want to be appreciated. And I remember there was a director, I won't mention his name, but I mentioned him in my book, Vibrations. 12 years later, he read the book, and he saw that I mentioned when he was directing that he was picking on everybody except for Sesu Hayakawa, who was a great old Japanese actor. And it was a wonderful play about a Japanese general, I guess almost a general, and an young American pilot. And they both landed on an island, and the war was over, and they didn't know it. So they saw each other and thought they were supposed to be hating and killing each other. But the Japanese gentleman couldn't speak English. So the director, being a real sadist, saw that the old guy was the star, and he didn't speak English. So he picked on the very young actor, who was great, and me, who was then a 28-year-old composer. Finally, we get to Philadelphia, and I said, well, how's Mr. Hayakawa doing after the opening? He said, oh, he's having an interview on Channel 12. I said, well, he doesn't speak English. I said, yes, he does. He's brilliant. And I went there. He said, yes, Stanislavski method was very interesting, but I was trained as a Zen Buddhist priest, and I had my own way of building character. It was like incredible, like a Mr. Encyclopedia of American and English-speaking culture. And I said, Mr. Hayakawa, I didn't know that you could speak English. He said, of course, I studied that. But he said, I realized that the director had a lot of personal problems. So I figured the best way to deal with his insecurity was just to turn myself off totally and have him think that I couldn't speak English. And I said, wow.
Let's talk about Jack Kerouac for a minute, because, basically I consider myself a journalist, a documentarian, a hysterian, spoken word artist. I just do music as the machine gun to the bullets I fire off. I still think spoken word alone is one of the, it is in a sense almost a form of jazz if you do it right. What was it like working with Jack Kerouac?
I loved it. He never considered it work. I was at a bring your own bottle party where the painters would have their stuff 10 feet in the air so that people couldn't pour drinks and burn cigarettes. And everybody would bring either some Dr. Brown's black cherry soda, some Gallo wine, if they could afford that, and potato chips and a great song and a story. And we would all go up, and the mantra of Greenwich Village in the 50s and the Lower East Side, which were then very much related, was, where's the party? And the party was usually on a Friday night or a Saturday night at a painter who had an illegal loft with a lot of space and a lot of great friends, and everybody would just come barging in and entertain one another. So it was a great place to have a date on a Friday or Saturday night because there was no overhead. And I looked like a lumberjack with a French-Canadian boucheron. It's the old Quebec lumberjacks came in, and he said, handed me a piece of paper and said, play for me. And then he took the paper back before I could read what was on it. And I just closed my eyes, and I had there was no piano in this guy's voice, so I played the little penny whistles and a French horn. And I could just feel him when he was reading. It was like when I played with Monk or Dizzy or those great giants. They would just make you feel something. And when I worked with the Actors Studio years later as acting, which I never did in my life, with Estelle Parsons and all those great actors, I could feel they made you feel what to do. And I just got that feeling from him. Then he finished reading whatever it was. I don't know if he made it up, whatever the heck it was, running off chasing some wonderful young woman.
Skirt.
And we kept bumping into each other at different parties. And then I finally found out we both spoke French at home. And he was interested in sports and people. And he loved Bach, Beethoven, and jazz and country music and folk music. And he was just a wonderful, warm person. He was from Lowell, Massachusetts, a real small mill town. I've been to a farm in Feasterville, Pennsylvania, living in a town. And as complete outsider outcasts, we found a wonderful commonality and friendship with one another. And he was the kind of person that would sit in the room quietly, check everything else and everybody else out. And then when he got well known, he would purposefully look for the most insecure person in the room and hang out with them. And he always was about sharing. He was a devout Catholic as well as being a Buddhist. And he believed really in that old way of loving thy neighbor and the golden rule. And Sonny Rollins, whom Jack loved, when I met in 55 when I was playing with Mingus. And recently I spoke to him on the phone. He said, you know, man, he said, I can't play the saxophone anymore. I can hardly get around. He said, I've never been happier because now I spend all my time thinking and trying to practice the golden rule because that's where it's really at. And I flashed back to what he was like way back then and what Jack was like and what a lot of people I meet every day are like. You have that wonderful, warm thing where they're thinking about other people in addition to themselves. And as they say in the vernacular in the South, sopping up the good vibes and trying to be with that beauty that surrounds us if we allow ourselves to try to feel that way. And that's the only thing that keeps me going. And I'm not becoming depressed by current events, which have always been a drag. So when people start whining and blaming how rotten things are, I say, well, that's true. But ever since Adam and Eve left.
Thank you very much. It has always been exactly the same. We just have more access to the horror and the corruption. I mean, right now, I'm an apocalyptician. I've been talking about this for 40 years. I know it's going down, but why it has never changed. It has never changed.
See, what I say, lady, about that is the people who are whining and complaining, justifiably, they discovered after 401 years that racism, no kidding. Well, ever since Adam and Eve left the Garden of Eden, rents have been too high, and men and women have been hassling and struggling with each other. So your introduction when you were insulting our commander and thief, I loved it because you said a lot of things I wouldn't dare say.
Well, why would you not? Well, you don't need to say them because I've been saying them all along. But the truth is this, it's like, I'm sorry. And I do love men in their right place, but their place is not in control of the whole world. It is not to be fucking everybody in it. Look, I love a good fucker as much as the next gal, but you got to stop fucking the planet and fucking everybody else. I mean, we've always known that. Look, the Bronze Age is when the women lost the fucking planet. I'm not saying we got to get back to it because I don't know. I'm not a solutionist. I'm just a hysterian. But thank you very much for saying that because I got to keep talking about it. And again, I got to speak. It's not only my problem. This is what it is. And again, going back to what you said, trust me on this. You know, night is starting to fall. I am a hedonist of the highest order, honey. And I ain't going out like some of the people I know because I have control. I wish I could say I had control of my desires. I have control of my desires, but I respect what my desires are. My desires are not to be imprisoned by the thought patterns of fucking fascist. So night comes around, I'm going to have a good time. And isn't that when we usually are on the stage? Or, of course, my best performances are usually one-on-one, but we'll get to that later now, David, won't we? Let him laugh. He's let him have a little chuckle on that. Tim, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you gave me that story about Sonny because what a wise guy his whole life, because he would check out throughout his career where he wouldn't play concerts for a few years. I mean, he was practicing, but he was also just taking a recess to kind of just reflect and go to that zone. So it's amazing that he can be in such a peaceful place when basically your motor skills start collapsing around in front of your own eyes, especially for someone with that kind of power and talent. It's basically inspiring when that you told me that you had this contact with him about this.
Yeah, because he inspired me way back in 1955. My first
Oh,
gig.
amazing, of course, yes.
Funny, he just come back from Chicago, and so he came along and played. Cedar Walton played the piano, and Teddy Kotick, who was Charlie Parker's bass player, played. Here I was with guys way over my head, and it was so beautiful to be with them. And when I drove them out and back, all they did was talk about older musicians they knew who weren't necessarily that appreciated. And they painted a picture for me, and all those older musicians, older than them, showed me, including Rudolf Serkin at the Marlborough Music Festival, a great classical piano player, and Metropolis, the conductor, and Edgar Varese, the composer, a lot of heavy, monster, great people. They showed me that part of the gig is if you live long enough to become an older person, you have a responsibility to pay that tuition from the University of Hangoutology, of which I'm a scholarship student. I have 7 honorary doctorates, but my study is the University of Hangoutology, where it's free. The only tuition is to learn to say please and thank you, and to share what you know with other people, hang out with people that are better than you'll ever be. And if you see someone else come along, take the time to say hello and act like a human person, and try to give them a little bit of what you can't give the people who showed you that stuff, because they usually aren't here anymore. I was going to Cuba for the first time in 41 years. I'd been there with Dizzy Gillespie, Stan Getz, Earl Hines. We were the first Americans to go as a fluke before Columbia Records went down and pretended that we weren't there. And Paquito de Rivera, others who we met, finally mentioned the fact that we'd already been there a year ahead of time, and just played and had a wonderful time. And after 41 years, I got a call back. I said, wow. So someone said, look, the New York Times is going to be there. The first thing they're going to ask you is, what do you think of the president? I said, I don't even want to talk about him. He doesn't deserve the recognition. We're going down there for music and people and culture, and the music bringing people together. That's much heavier than some poor guy who's son of a slumlord whose father bailed him out his whole life. That ain't nothing worthwhile talking about. They said, well, you're going to have to say something. I said, I have my answer planned. What are you going to say? I think there are other people better qualified for that line of work. They asked me the same question 3 times, wanted me to go into my vocabulary.
Well, you can always send them to my podcast. It's not a problem. You can go, why don't you ask Lydia Lunch what she thinks, and she's going to fucking tell you.
Well, you know, I think one reason why they asked you so many times, and if you turns out most people don't know anything about music. So when you're dealing with a journalist, they want to talk about anything but music because they actually don't know anything about it.
So they finally had to ask me about music, and I said some really nice stuff. And I understood a long time ago, you get a lot less space if you don't drop your drawers and do what you're expected to do. But on the other hand, you're not playing into their hands in the situation I was in, so that became irrelevant, because the story wasn't what I thought of him. The story was what all of us who were there together somehow could do through music.
What's kind of amazing to me is that the last really musically educated president was Nixon, because he was a good pianist, a very good pianist supposedly, and he would take an hour out of his day to look at scores, and he was a huge Bach fanatic.
Excuse me. That does not just. True, though. I don't give a shit. Doesn't justify his fucking existence. We'll just say
it doesn't. It doesn't.
All right.
It doesn't.
All right. I don't like where this is going.
Well, I'm just talking about human beings. You know, they're complicated.
I'm just saying what. Yes, David.
Oh, so you would appreciate this. Duke Ellington came to the White House, and Nixon knew one tune, one jazz tune. So he said, I'd like to sit in with the Duke Ellington Orchestra. And so Nixon played his little piece that he could play, and the orchestra sounded great. Then he didn't get up from the piano stool, which was Duke Ellington's. And so Duke was standing there, and Nixon said, I'd like to play one more. They said, oh, please, Mr. President. So Duke walked off the stage. Then he played a second piece, and everybody said, oh, man, he should have quit while he was ahead. So finally, they said to Mr. Ellington, they said, Mr. Ellington, You didn't sit with the president when he was playing. He said he was supposed to play one piece. That's what we agreed on. He said, I would never tell him how to run the country, and he should never tell me to run my bands.
Yeah,
There
exactly.
you go.
So there's always a hip way to get around low-life fascist scumbag type people by taking a different kind
The
of
high
route.
road. Take the high road.
It's not
So look, all of the things you've done, all of the people you've worked with, the awards you've won, the books you've written, 89 years old, spunky as fuck. What do you want to do next?
I'd like to improve, and I've just got some dental work done. I'm going to try my 640,000th comeback on the French horn. And my grandson ran up the hill where I am, and then he said, come on, Grandpa, do that. And then I was hobbling up there. I said, I want to see if I can get back in shape and keep up with my grandson. And then I think also if I could spend more time with a lot of old friends I don't get to see often enough. And I wanted to write an opera about Ira Hayes that I almost got a chance to do after doing a program about him years ago. And a lot of other things. And I realized some of them I'm not going to do, and that's okay too. But mostly I'm trying to do what Sonny Rollins told me about, trying to improve, trying to get better, and practice some of those high ideals, try to walk the talk that I talk. And that gives you something to live for, and also to continue to be able to understand and make a contribution to where I am, and hopefully be able to inspire somebody else. Because Kerouac and I all agreed that our gig basically in the arts is to foster creativity in others and make someone else feel what you felt when you were a little kid, to dare to go for it, to dare to try to do it. And that's part of the gig. I think a lot about that responsibility, not because I feel guilty, but I figure that's what you're supposed to do. And if you're lucky enough to live long enough to become an older person, then that's the gig, not just to be a professional walking cadaver, but to inspire other people to get out there and kick ass and do something beautiful and spread a little love around and put something back into the pot. That's what this is about.
Is there anyone that you really love in literature, arts, just culture in general, that weren't ultimately about sharing? And I mean, just the people that just take and don't give back. I mean, it's all right in front of you, and it is about
okay, well,
sharing
hang
the
on. Let me
information.
hang on, Tim Dahl. I know where you're going with this. Look, the art is not necessarily the artist. The artist is not necessarily what they create. Some of us can combine the two. Some of us are the embodiment of a living artist that creates and wants to encourage others, or what, that gives out. Not everyone is like that, and they don't have to be. And I'm thinking of, I don't even have to name names, because some of them are in prison and some of them are dead, and they were still great musicians or great writers. And I want to focus on the people I want in my life that create. I want to focus on continuing to do what I do. And actually, David, a little advice: you want to get in shape, boxing, and anytime you want to be a coach, I think 3 minutes of boxing a day is better than walking up the hill 10 times. Trust me, you'll get your stamina right up.
I boxed in the Army, and the one thing I still watch fights all the time.
Well, then that's why you like me. You see, you knew. You've never, trust me, Tim Dahl, how's my right hook?
Frightening.
If I slap or punch somebody, it's rare, but they always come in for the hug, and usually they request it. But I'm just saying, the only reason I need to box is I need to know one deadly blow. After all, honey, you know what I'm saying? You look like this, you got to know. You got a mouth like this, you better know how to throw a throat punch. All I'm saying, am I a violent person? Take it to the stage. With a face like that, I mean, do I look like a violent person to you? Come a little closer, just saying.
You're still here.
We're all still here. And you know what? You were an inspiration to us, because 89 is just a number. You still got shit to do. You're going to do it. This has been the Lydia and Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, and David Amram. Thank you so much for everything you have contributed to our lives.
I also thank all my brother musician who was there, speaking about what he did, and Simon and everybody else, and all the things that you do